This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode. Hey everyone, welcome. It's Larry Bailey. We are here with another weekly workshop. This one is going to cover all about input forms while we're wrapping everybody up into letting everybody in. Just as a reminder for those that are new to here, if you're watching this on replay, you can always come every other Tuesday. Check out the schedule with masteringencompass.com. It's free to join. Anybody can join pretty much from wherever you are, no matter who you work for. We've got lots of folks that work for third-party companies joining these, which I think is awesome. For those that are just rolling in, also, we're going to be going through some updates. Hopefully everybody made out okay with the 25.1 release. TPO Connect users had our own bit of fun over the last 36 hours, give or take. Making sure that things are working properly. You fared all right. And hopefully everybody's getting over all their jet lag and their traveling experiences from last week from the ICE conference. For those of you that are here, quick show of hands just to give everybody else a heads up, who was able to go to the ICE conference last week? I'm raising my hand. Go ahead and raise your hands up. So yeah, we've got a ton of people that were able to go. Right now, if you don't get on your folks, on your decision makers to get you the budget in for next year, start now. You're going to miss a great show next year. I'm certainly advocating for more workshops. I think everybody really aligned well to what ICE has done over the last couple of conferences, which is to talk about what you can do now, right? Not about what's coming down the pipeline, but what can you do now today? I know that on my session, I was up there with Frank Fury from Matchbox and Matt Van Vossen from Absolute Mortgage. And so us three were up there as panelists with Sam and Kayleigh. By the way, if you haven't had a chance to meet Kayleigh, she was in some of the what do they call them? Open hours, office hours, whatever. And her brain is like in another planet, another universe. She's already working on code lockdown for 25.2. That's happening this week, apparently. And they're already working on what's coming in 25.3. So yeah, I'm just like, that's great, Kayleigh. Good for you. I'm trying to help everybody with 25. So thanks. The good news is, we're going to continue to work with ICE to make sure that these incremental updates are happening. So a couple of things before I get deep into the subject for today, a couple of things I wanted to really point out in language, right? And so, I don't know, when was it, October, whatever, we saw the SDK sunset. That's SDK transition. Right. And so wording it can mean everything. Language is everything. So SDK transition, as a reminder, SDK is not going away, gang. I know there's still a ton of people who think you're going to lose SDK. You'll only have a problem after October this year if you don't sign up with ICE for your acknowledging that you're planning on possibly maybe using SDK after October. It costs you nothing to do this, by the way. Nothing. You may have to pay a fee if you're a high-end SDK user after next year. The terms, again, I don't have memorized, but basically just make sure you get with your ICE rep and sign the acknowledgement form. They'll put a SKU on your contract just so that when it comes time for ICE to basically make the transition, there are some Encompass instances that don't use SDK. Actually, they don't have any plugins. And they don't need them, so there's no reason to have them running. But if you're using SDK today, make sure you sign the waiver, or it's not a waiver, but sign the document with ICE, and that way they know that you are going to be using it. Luba just added a thing on there Yeah, and to Luba's point, if you are running SDK now, I know Beth and I had dinner, and I think their total bill was like $6 a month. So if it didn't change anything, and so in any event, the idea is let know about that. That's one thing. So SDK transition. The second thing is we were all used to calling it like Encompass instance for the client, the client, the CID, the client ID, client instance ID. Those are all things that we would say in the past. And I want to brainwash you here, and I want you to start using it interface. So desktop interface, web interface. There was a drinking game at ICE for those that are still playing the drinking game. It's interoperability. So drink. So interoperability, drink again, means that it's going to work in desktop. It's going to work in desktop interface as well as web interface. So again, this promotes the idea that when we work in Encompass as admins now, we need to have an entire view of what's going on in Encompass. Earlier today, I met with hopefully a potential client, and we talked about admin coaching and right. I do that through Mastering Encompass. And the reason why I created this as an ongoing certification, an ongoing coaching program, is because our industry always changes and our technology always changes. So the idea of getting a certification, it's silly to me. It's preposterous, quite honestly. And so the question I got was, hey, my admin feels really good about desktop and all they want to do is learn web. Well, 25.1 was a clear indication that you can't just have your blinders on and say, well, I only want to look at the web instance, because we had changes that were happening in both instances, both web and desktop, and that was for retail channel and non-retail channels alike. And so as an administrator, you got to have a head on your you got to have your head on a swivel to make sure that you're keeping track of all these things. Hopefully everybody got some good use out of the 25.1 course that I created. Hopefully that was useful for you. In there, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I created a course that I'm just lowering your hand, Carrie and Jill. I created a course for the 25.1 release notes. Katie liked the layout. Hopefully you guys like the layout in there, and I'm going to continue to do that. I thought it was easy to do, and plenty to deliver. I'm going to continue doing that. So I'm going to add 3 more free courses soon. And I'm going to go through exactly how to construct the solutions that on Tuesday's screen in the class at ICE. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and see if my computer can actually get savvy enough to put this up. So I'm going to share a screen, see if I can't make this happen. So in the Tuesday event, I didn't have much time to really explain how to do this. There are journey workbooks that are available at ICE. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere. If anybody has the links for those, I'll certainly look for them too. We'll put them in the community. But basically, one-click disclosures. And what's important on here is just following the path for the guide and understanding patterns. So the one-click disclosures is the one free course I'm going to show people how to basically build, so you can leverage it. Reg B compliance. We actually did this in today's admin course as a live class because I wanted to make sure everybody understood the concepts of building out the workflow first, and then building out the 2 different schedulers, one for 20 days, one for 30 days for the notice of incomplete application, and then how to create tasks, notifications, and then how to automate the document delivery for both the NOIA as well as a statement of denial. All through workflow rules, by the way. No, native, like done. So that was cool. And then the next one that is going to be on the list is the pre-approval. I spoke to this directly at the event. And this involves, I know it says soft credit. You might not be doing soft credit, but the concept here is service automation, right? We picked soft credit because it was just topical, but it's really service provider automation and control. And so sometimes there's just a one-off service for, as an example, like maybe you're just ordering flood or something. And then there's also other types of controls, like maybe you want to run a service for the undisclosed debt monitoring, or you want to run another credit at the end. Who the heck knows? Whatever your workflow is. So those are the three that we're going to go. I'm going to create free classes in the community and that kind of a thing. And Sarah posted a link for all of the journey books, I think is what they're calling them. Sarah, thanks for posting that. So you'll see it in the chat. You can watch it in the chat, check it out. Appreciate that. Yeah, and Lubis says, right. So if we go back to one-click disclosures, you do not have to disclosures. You can still treat them as one click, and it's the click that does the automation. And what we're talking about is you don't sit there and wait for all those screens to go through. Now, there's a lot of prerequisites that are not called out on here. We can go over those some other time. Cool. So having said all that, let's get down to business. And when we talk about the topic that I wanted to cover today, the main thing I try to focus in on is custom input forms, guys. We've had the ability to customize input forms for a little bit now, and yeah, you guys love, your businesses love to customize input forms. Show of hands, be honest. Who has customized the 1003 application? Previously the 2009, now typically it's a 2020. Come on, show of hands. Who's customized the URLA? You can admit it. It's okay. We're in a safe space. I know there's more than one. I know there's more than Jill. So if you're watching the replay and you're one of these folks, thanks, Jill, for being honest. You might think, who the heck would do that, right? You might think like, that is crazy. I'm gonna share with you something that is kind of crazy. It is very, very common. And when I say very common, I mean it happens more times than you think with companies. So how about we give another one? Who's customized the borrower summary? All right, that's got to be everybody, right? Everybody's customized the borrower summary. Come on. So why? And in desktop, the answers, thanks everybody. That's a lot more. Jill, you're not alone. I promise you're not alone. So the idea here is that when you go through and you customize something. So this is a live form in a live environment. I've obfuscated the name as best as I could here. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. So this is not, John, I have not customized the borrower summary. I'll tell you that. And I don't customize standard print form or standard input forms because there's no reason to. And I'm going to get into the context behind this, and you can absolutely disagree, and your business can disagree, but do me a favor and just keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. So I want you guys to look at this, and you probably have done something similar to this, or a remnant, right? And so what are we looking at? We're looking at shortcuts. So these are non-modal pop-outs controls. And what that means in English is you can click this button, right? And it can pop out a form so it can float on your screens, and you can still go about working in Encompass. These are all panels, and I don't know if you can see it on your screen depending on the resolution, but there's all kinds of extra work that goes in here to create these borders around all these different controls. You're lining things up, you're assigning control IDs, God forbid. Who skips, again, show of hands, be honest. Who has no problem skipping the tab index when you're building out these kinds of input forms? Like, do you really do tab indexing? You're like, nah, because the user's going to click through it anyway. So there's the top part of that input form. Here's another part of that same input form. Here's another part of that same input form. Guys, this input form is, I'm not exact, and I work on a 27-inch diagonal, so this is about probably 16 inches. Lube is like, tab, I don't even care if they line up. Listen, it's hard. It's hard to line these things up. And so when I look at these, as I've been working in Encompass Web now for over 2 years, customizing those input forms for different things, one of the pieces that I wanted to get through was the ability of understanding why we do these things. And the reason why I want to understand is because it's all workflow before tech. So in the chat, if you want, help me understand why. And if anybody wants to talk about this, I'll enable your mic. Just raise your hand. I'll enable your mic or whatever. But what I find typically is when we go to customize an input form, we keep going with it because the business keeps going with it. This concept of wanting to have everything on one input form, right? If we go back to this guy, minimize these. If you go back to this guy, since the beginning of time, since we've been able to customize these things, our concept has always been put everything on one form so they don't have to leave it, right? Right? That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants one thing. And it feels good because you can just go one place. You don't have to move around to different input forms. That was one solution. Another solution was pretty slick developers decided that they could reorganize your input form list in desktop. So in desktop instance, you can go through and reorganize or make appear or disappear certain input forms so that your team members are efficient in only seeing the input forms that they need to see, because we've got multiple persona syndromes, which presents a whole bunch of input forms that they don't need to see in an order that we can't control. So what do? We customize. And again, it's not that it doesn't happen, just fills in, it just creates this. The second part of this input form customization problem, and Sarah, it's like you were reading my mind or you read my notes here. Sarah's responsive, just make it tell me what I need to fill in. So then you have some really talented developers who build Visual Basic form load code or other action code, and they will basically make all of these controls appear or disappear or display messages. And what you end up with is an experience that can't be moved anywhere. God forbid it has to be updated or replicated for something else. You're stuck. You're stuck with something that breaks. You're stuck with something that is out of alignment. I'm going to go ahead and let Candace in and Jesse. Hello, Candace and Jesse. And the idea here is that you don't need to do this. This is actually part of the problem. It's as good as somebody's asking you to constantly write business rules to basically automate all of Encompass always. And so what ends up happening, I don't know if you've had this at your shop, but I've seen this repeatedly, is milestone completion business rules. Anybody have any of those? Right? Everybody? And so what the business ends up telling you is they want you to build milestone completion rules so that the team can go, when they go to finish the milestone, they can try to finish it and they'll get the messages so they know what's wrong so they can go fill it in. Not too long ago, I did a workflow review for a company and I asked the loan officer, I said, show me how you go through your application. I'm not making this up. They went to the milestone they need to finish, and that's where they filled in their information. Now you might be laughing. You might be shaking your head. You might be rolling your eyes. But the reality is, when you build that behavior, you handle your organization's workflow to a point of a really, really bad spot. And so, so where am I leading you with this? What are you supposed to do? You're working for the business. The business is telling you what they want, and what are you supposed to do about it? And what I want to guide you here on, the whole point of today's workshop is to really talk about it as a group. And you can use chat. You can, again, if you want to come up and talk on mic, whatever, just let me know. I'll unmute you. The concepts of how to work through these input forms on the desktop interface are completely different than how you want to operate on your web interface. Now, has anybody had a chance to see, first of all, has anybody actually developed any type of input forms on web yet? It's going to be for your sales team up until this past weekend because you didn't have eFolder pop out, right? Which is what everybody's and printing. Don't forget printing, right? We couldn't print until this past weekend. So is anybody working on that? So Luba was part of it last week, and Michael said, yeah. Mike Reed. So Mike, tell me what you've built so far this year in chat. Tell me the kind of input form you've built. Was it form based or was it card based? And so while we're waiting for Mike to answer that question, and Candace said on the list for this year, and Sarah's on the list for this year. I want to go over a concept with you, and this is kind of the whole thesis of today. Yeah. So Mike Reed, if let me know if you're doing a form based, your team card based. Sarah's team card based. So here's what I want to throw up on the screen. I'm just waiting for it to resolve because my internet is what it is. Thank you. Katie says built one, but it was Craig says, how does a custom input form for web behave in desktop? Oh, that's easy, Craig. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And so I want you to look at your input forms in a different way. I want to pull the veil back for those that are Matrix movie awareness people, right? So I want you to start to look at your input forms differently. I want you to think about, why do we have everything in one place versus having everything in one place? Now, the distinction here is there's no code here, right? I can come in, that's the first distinction. The second distinction is these application cards, ICE did a beautiful thing and built them for us. So I went through this in class last week when we were going out, and I'll bring it up here on screen as we go through the conversation today. But ICE is built, and I don't know the exact count, but it feels certainly like a couple of hundred of these guys, these cards already. It's already built it for you. You don't have to do anything. You can rename them if you want, or change the picture if you want here in the card tile, but you don't have to rebuild them. And the idea is all of these things that we're used to seeing in desktop by building these summary forms, they've already been compartmentalized. So that if you've got a user that's going over and you want to just drop the assets, you can do that. Now, again, here's my thesis. When we're over in desktop and we're doing these pop-outs, what's the difference between if I had a bunch of cards here that then popped out the what you can't see down here is there's a whole bunch of category boxes down below. A lot of these things are built within category boxes because they're not, they wanted to customize everything. So rather than pop out and float the state-specific disclosure information input form, they did a summary of those fields. And so what I'm trying to explain here for you is, if you've got this situation of your desktop custom input forms that looks anything remotely like this, or even more interestingly enough, for those that came in a little bit later, I asked how many people have actually, if you've actually taken a standard input form and then customized it, because we know that the moment that you customize a standard input form, it becomes custom, and therefore everything that gets updated, like another update happened this weekend, you now have to then update all of the controls and all of the forms that you've customized with the new information. And it's a maddening circle. And if you've got the resources and the expertise and the energy to do that indefinitely, great for you. I'm not going to do that because I don't have the energy or the resources or the patience to constantly update and look for changes to figure that part out. So part of my agenda here is to get you to look at your standard input forms and start to understand that when ICE went through, and I'll go back over here into the admin side. When ICE went through and built a lot of what Encompass Web is, the methodology that they chose was intentional to break up the existing standard input forms into all of these cards. Now I know these are forms, right? And so when we, hang on, I'm going to do this because I did this in class and it was actually funny. So I'm just holding the arrow down, and it's still going. And I know it's kind of blinking on the screen because I just don't have the capability to keep it flashing for you. But you can do this on your own. And so when you hold it down to the bottom, it takes, I don't know, 20 something seconds, and I'm still not down to the bottom. There's the bottom. And so all of these guys, all of these standard input forms, when you load them in, if you go over into, we'll go into CAT's application card here. When you go into web, what you're looking at is each of these cards represents an input form link. This is what's distinctive, pardon me, about desktop, is it breaks this up and it gives you just the information that you're looking for in that section. That's something that we were never able to accomplish in desktop. And the whole thesis of today is we've over customized our desktop input forms because the businesses were trying to summarize information into one screen. And when I do workflow reviews, I can tell you this hands down. I have yet to find a summary screen that's actually effective. And this is both, these are input forms that are built by super strongly talented folks, and these are input forms that are built by average folks. And the reason why they're not effective is because you don't need all the information here all the time. I don't need to see monthly housing expense every time I come here. If I'm really just looking for something that was in one of these other input forms that was on here, right? So here's REO. Why not just go to the real estate owned section? And so this is what I want to challenge you on with today's call. When you go back and if you're looking at your own settings now, great. And Candace, I see your question. I'll answer it 1 second. I want you to look at your input forms differently. I want to have you expand your vision on, rather than look at something like this, that you have to use loan form code or button click action code or whatever you're using to make it move into the viewer's view, which is what you have to do. And then you have to establish a method to get it out of their view. So usually it's a closed button in the upper right side or something. And I want you to really look at that workflow, because when you start building out web input forms, number one, as folks have mentioned here in the call today, you're going to use card view. I've heard of folks right now that are implementing Encompass web and they're not using card view, and I just wish they'd go back and change their minds, because there is not anything that I found that is more potent in terms of workflow effectiveness than me being able to control what's on the left nav, so that if the person logging in is not a loan officer, they're not going to see the quick call for LO. Just like if they're not a processor, they're not going to see LP forms. So I'm going to go back and answer questions. So Candace asks, can you show how to make it so that you don't have to scroll down to the custom form section to grab the custom form? Do you hide the standard? Oh, here, like how I have mine set up, Candace, in web. Yes, okay, I'll show you that 1 second. And then Sean says, do you know if there are any plans for web to allow us to either inject or completely hide sections of a standard input form? Well, no, again, if so here's Sean. Sean's walking into the room saying, I want to take a standard form, but I want to customize it. It doesn't compute. So kind of like an override, so as to negate much of the needed for creating custom input forms for basic changes. So Sean, what I'm going to have you do is you're going to find, so in admin, and Candace, I'm coming here for you too. So when you go to custom forms, what you're going to do is, I'm with you, Sean. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over, and let's say that, so here's a good example. I wanted to put at the top of the credit information form, I wanted to put the borrower information up here, because I knew that sometimes sales wants to just take the borrower information and then order credit. They didn't want to go to a summary. They're just on the phone. I'm like, hey, Sean. And you're like, hey, Larry. And I'm like, hey, Sean, can I run your credit? You're like, sure, Larry. So I'm like, okay, let me have your socials and stuff. And then I'll just order credit from here rather than have to go somewhere else and then come here. So the way I got here was by going to create a new using an existing form. And then I picked credit where, I can do a search if I was smart. So you can do credit, right? And credit information and ordering. And then I radio button and click accept. And then from in here, this will refresh. From in here, again, we're in form layout. As a reminder, you can't change the layout once it's established. So up in here, I just dropped another category box. If I can do it really easily, there it is. So category box, and then I built out my text box elements up in here, my form elements up here. So Sean, you're not going to obfuscate or hide or code or something. You're going to grab what's there and you're going to expand from there. Okay. Or if you come into an input form and you want to remove, you're going to remove it. But you're not, now that's the first way. Now, the second way, if you know JavaScript and you're talented at creating JavaScript, well, just write your JavaScript on here. So if we want to come over, let's close this out, leave. If you want to just click a new blank, okay, and I'm going to pick form layout and just do this here. You can just go right into code and just drop your code in and build a form. I've heard of people doing this. I've not seen it, nor have I personally done it. But Sean, maybe that's something that's interesting to you. There's going to be all kinds of ways to skin it. From my perspective, the average Encompass company out there closes less than 50 loans a month with a part-time admin. That's the average company. So that's the audience I'm really speaking to. For all of you talented JavaScript developers out there, or have your minds set on learning that, I don't want to dissuade you. I just want to make sure everybody understands that you don't need to know JavaScript to build a great workflow in Encompass web interface. Hopefully that resonates with most people. Because if you ask me to write JavaScript, I'm quitting. Like, I'm leaving. Not going to happen. Candace, loan left nav. Out of the box, it comes like this, standard. You're going to create one that says like main. And then what you saw me do was I created a custom set called loan officer forms. And if you look here, these 11 items are exactly what are in my loan file. And what you'll also see under this main, which is for everything except for brokered, because it's by the channel. But I disabled forms right there. So Candace, that's what you're going to do. Does that help? Hopefully that gives you an idea. For everybody else, this is how, yeah, you're welcome. This is also how I built out earlier, I don't know when it was, earlier this year, I dropped an input form in the community with an under construction page. And basically I turned off everything except for the under construction page. So when you log into Encompass Web, all you see is under construction. There's nothing else you can do in there. And so that was a clever answer to a team that was stuck on that. Okay, so to continue with this conversation, not to belabor the point, but I do want to talk about something that Sean mentioned, because it has come up a lot, especially recently, with regards to creating customization with web input forms, where you want things to appear, disappear, rearrange, etc. I'm going to encourage you to exploit before you explore, and I'm going to encourage you to not recreate a complicated situation that you did, and again, I'm picking on this one because it's here, that you did here. That's the first call to action. The second call to action, I'm going to bring up another input form. You guys are going to flip out. Well, maybe not. I'm probably being dramatic. So here's an input form. This happens to be a builder approval input form, and the reason why I use this as an example is because it's a great Luba, look away, it hurts her eyes. Look away, Luba. So they built this, and when I say they, I mean some folks who really just didn't know any better, because they needed to accomplish something. This is one of 17 input forms that looks like this, and this is one of the least busy forms. And yes, I have had to modify this form to insert new fields. And no, I'm not quite sure how I did it because it was crazy. Like I had to put in market director on this thing across 17 different input forms. Um, what do you think, Luba? Do you think there's tab index order on this thing? No, there's no. You want to get somewhere, you point and click. The reason why I bring this up is because now that I've talked about card view, do we really need all of this in your view at all at one time? Now, you might say yes, because I need to know what the date order was, and I need to know what the bank information is all at once, all the time when I look at this form. Whether or not it's true is debatable. But what I can tell you is you cannot do this in web. And this is a good example of this workflow might stay in desktop in terms of interface. That doesn't mean the entire company works in desktop, but this builder approval, they might actually want to stay in desktop because it turns out it's the best workflow. So part of the other end of this conversation about overcomplicating input forms is making sure that you remember that we still have a desktop interface and we still have a web interface that we're going to have from now until who knows when. I know there's been a lot of whatever talk that ICE is shutting down desktop, and that's just false. Candace's catchphrase from last year, don't desktop the web. Yeah, you could say that. And really what it's talking about is don't recreate what you have in desktop interface into web interface. It's two totally different things. It would be the same of you don't create, for those that have mobile phones, you don't create an app the same way you create a website. You just don't. And any developer knows that that's just the case. So it's the same thing here with this. And I want to bring up again this example because you can, if you can't see this, whatever, but all of these are out of alignment. Every single one of these is out of alignment. And to Luba's point, it hurts her eyes. That's number one. Number two, what some people have to do because they have, eyesight challenges, they actually have to zoom in on this input form. And we know that desktop is not responsive. So when they zoom in on their monitor, they actually lose some of these controls, which means they can't do their job. So it's not only do you deal with physical usage of how do we use this for a normal situation or a situation of for the average person. Part of the other challenge that I see happening between desktop and web is the physical layout and then also colors. So this has also been a conversation about overcomplication when it comes to input forms between desktop and web. One of the pieces of feedback that I've heard from companies when I walk them through have them start leveraging web interface for their operations is where's the colors? I want to color something that's missing or needed or something like that. And although natively it does support the highlighting of fields that are missing, or if you use your field lookup tool, you can find it'll kind of cascade it with a little yellow around it. You want to stay away from colors. I know that in desktop we've got some folks that are coloring pipelines, or even some folks that put colors inside of fields to draw attention. I just want to remind you that although it may be possible to do in web with JavaScript, it's not something that I want you to necessarily always continue. The reason why we do this in input forms is because you end up with something that looks like this. And so you're trying to draw their eyes to where they need to look because there is so much going on. That's an important part. Or in something like this, same thing. On web, when we look at this, what I want you to focus on is less is more. So, when we study behaviors of people using things, if you need to scroll, there's a recent article in a magazine about UI with some large lenders, and they literally watch to see if their people have to scroll on the screen. And if they have to scroll, it's not good enough. It needs to be changed. They do not want scrolling. This goes back to similar conversations that we've had with you want big summary screens so you don't have to look elsewhere. But the idea is when you're looking at input form development, I want you to think about what do my people need to see at that moment in the workflow? Not everything, right? We don't need to see the dictionary on one page. We have sections. And so when you're dealing with, again, going back to the card love, the reason why this is more powerful than this is because I don't need, well, that's a bad example. I don't need bar summary origination. I don't need all this information, right? I just needed to know what the credit information was, or I just needed to know what the preferred contact information was for the borrower, that kind of thing. Or, whatever. You guys get it, right? Borrower address. So rather than do this, which is what we're doing now on desktop, focus in on a better way for whatever your workflow is, a better way to manage that when looking at your input forms. Again, this is not an edict where you have to move to web. It's not what this is about. This is about just calling out to reality of we are in a situation where we are constantly overcomplicating input forms in the spirit of efficiency, and it leads to inefficiencies and it leads to problems with support and very expensive situations that are entirely hard to unwind. So, does anyone have any good stories? Any conversations? Any questions about anything that I've shown today or gone over? For those that got in late, I do want to just reinforce that I will be going through and adding in these free courses into the community of how to exactly build one-click disclosures, which can be automation, right? You can do an automated initial disclosures with native. I'm doing it now with clients and projects. You can also do it as one click in case you don't want truly automated. We're also going to be teaching you, I'm going to be teaching you how to build a Reg B compliance workflow that's here, as well as the pre-approval. Here's soft credit, but basically how to automate services within workflow rules. And so that'll all be in the Mastering Encompass community for you soon. So Libby says, we built a summary form on our monitors and had to reconfigure when we realized LOs work on laptops. I'm sorry, Libby, I don't mean to laugh. I'm sure that really was upsetting. But it's just an example of, I have a 27-inch monitor. I have a 14-inch laptop monitor. Some folks work on homes with 24s. It all has to come into a single frame. To Luba's point, you have users that are actually zooming in. So if you zoom in to Encompass, if you guys haven't ever done this, give it a shot. Zoom into 150 on your monitor, and then go into your Encompass input forms and watch the chaos. It's real. It's real. A lot of monitors are zoomed in on laptops or zoomed into 125, and that's still too small depending on the quality of your screen. The better quality, the more you have to zoom in for some people to see things. And so, yeah, Control Plus works sometimes to zoom in too. Yeah, you can use all kinds of zooming things. Hold the control button down with your mouse or Control Plus. Okay. Cool. So takeaways is I'd love to see in the community. I'd love to see any feedback on today's workshop. I'd love to hear what you're doing. If you guys get stuck on something, does anybody have any questions before we break? Like it was, these are meant to be a little bit more feedback oriented. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, or want me to show you how to do something on here, let me know, or ask a question. I can take you off mute. Last but not least, then, as we're rolling out here, we've got every other Tuesday. The agenda is set. We're going to be doing an ad hoc community workshop on hedging. So I've been talking to Optimal Blue about having them come online to go through a 101 on hedging so you understand how things work, and we could talk more about secondary stuff. And then also, again, doing more workshops building things. I think as this conference showed, it's really important for you guys to learn how to actually build things and do them as you go instead of just listening and watching. The hard part is doing the work. So if you need anything, if there's anything I can do as follow up from today's workshop, let me know. If I can drop you anything in the community as far as how to start something, be happy to. Sean adds, what was that quick qual for LO form you showed on a web custom input form? I haven't looked around much. That's something I built. So going back to Sean wants to see this guy. Sean, that was something I put together for a client, truthfully. I use this as a template to kind of just talk about the conversation. This was built for a client because they were, the ops manager was like, the sales team wants to use Encompass Web. This is going back to last year. Sales team wants to work on Encompass Web and to disclose on the web. I'm never going to let them disclose on the web. And they were using a third-party initial disclosure automation tool. And my job was to give them an example of how to not need the third-party automation tool. So I'm like, cool, let me try. Like, I'm down for a challenge. So what I ended up delivering was I ended up delivering a full solution on web. And then the loan officers were like, no, we don't want to work on the web. So that was fun. So, but I delivered, this is just like a working proof of concept. Ultimately, I had several cards on here that guided them through those steps from top left to bottom right. And I don't mind showing this. I've shown this before publicly. But this is what I used to unwind the necessity for the initial disclosure automation third-party tool. And the reality is these are all custom fields. And so I ran these custom field calcs. There's a specific way to do it in order to get the messaging out properly. But by using this, that ops manager actually now lets because I converted this to desk. Again, these are custom fields, right? That means no matter what interface you're on, these fields exist. And so once I built this in web, I built it in web. I'm sorry, I built it desktop first, and then I recreated it in web. I'm not exaggerating, like 15 minutes. It's super easy to do this once you get the hang of it. But my point is that because I use custom field calcs, it's completely flexible on either desktop interface or web interface, and the overall results kind of scale up. And again, there's a ton of custom field calc code. Like, anybody can write custom field calc code if you can follow the logic of what you need. And as an example, like in this case, it's 65 is failing. So on web, what's super cool is you just type 65 and it takes you right to it. And so if I wanted to go to that input form, it'll take you there and it loads up. And here's that yellow highlighting thing I was telling you about. So the form actually resolves to the field location automatically and highlights it for you. So it's Sean, that's how I do it. So hopefully that answered your question, and I hope this inspires everybody else, right? You can do this, and if you know your company's workflow, you can build these cards in a logical flow for your team. So if you do like heavy government stuff and your processors need to have certain cards always accessible, give it to them in that, right? And I put ATRQM over here, but you don't have to. You can put ATRQM anywhere. Same thing with government forms. Like, I put all my government forms in here. I put all my FHA management via. I did this. So use your imagination on here, and really understand your workflow first. Because once you understand your company's workflow, this becomes very, very simple. Because now they're no longer going all over the place looking for something, and you no longer have to build all these crazy custom input forms just to give them a summary. And that's the argument for my thesis. That's the whole point, is showing you this to really deal with unwinding this. You can unwind this in desktop. You can. You just have to have a good workflow understanding of what people need and when they need it, so that this isn't just a shotgun Hail Mary for everything. It can be very specific. So I hope today's workshop's been helpful for you. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope it got you thinking. If you want to continue the conversation, do it on the community. Like, we'll have this replay up hopefully soon. The marketing team's a little bit behind getting all the stuff done for ICE, but we'll have it up soon. Candace's note, you don't put controls per se in card forms. You have other forms. So you build regular forms and then build. Yeah. So just to kind of summarize what Candace is talking about. So again, the methodology here is these are just clicks, right? And so when you go through, you can go right into an input form, right? That's what this is. This is just an input form. And when you go through, my internet sucks. So you can do that, or like with application cards, or you can go into a card. So Candace, you can link a card to an input form that's card view, that's input form card view. Like you could keep going into card views if you really wanted to. My attitude is always 3 levels. So don't go deeper than 3 levels. So you can do from a card to a card to a card, but I wouldn't go deeper than that because then your teams are going to get lost. You can always come back to government forms here, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So here's another example of USDA management. If you're familiar with this, if you do a lot of USDAs, tell me this isn't easier. Because if I just need to go to tracking or I just need to go to income worksheet, I don't have to figure it out. So anyway, carrying on about the same thing. Any other questions before we break? Are these formats useful for you, by the way? I try to pick a topic and that kind of thing. Candace or Carrie, you have a question? You want me to take you? I'll take you off mute, I guess. Allow Mike. I don't know. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. I don't know if that's what you raise your hand on. No? Okay. I guess not. Candace said, that's what confused me in the very beginning. I wanted to build a card you didn't understand. Oh, it was from earlier, sorry. But I didn't understand I needed the regular form to put on the card view. Yeah. So hopefully that makes more sense now, Candace. If I'm still confusing you, let me know. But yeah, if you want to see stuff, ultimately your destination has to be an input form. So when we're looking at, again, just in case anybody else is in the same confusing spot, when you go to build an input form, you have 2 choices, right? Custom form, you have 2 choices when you first create an input form. You have a card, it'll be up here in the upper left, a form layout, right? Or a card layout. Once you choose a layout, you can't go back. Look, it goes away. So if you pick form, you just have to pick how many category boxes you want to start with. Or if you pick card view, you're stuck. So if you make a mistake, just close it and then start over. And if you're copying from an existing form, it's going to copy the format of that form. You cannot change it. It's done. So Candace, hopefully that makes sense. You understand it now? Awesome. Hopefully everybody else gets it. Hopefully today's been helpful for you. And is import from test? I don't know what. Oh, you mean in here when you go to new input form? It's wherever you want to input form from. It's going to come up to your desktop. So you're importing. If you download it from your test, you're going to import. If you export from your test, so you can only just. By the way, too, if a form is enabled, you cannot export it. You can only export if it's not enabled. Okay, Luba? For everybody else? Not to call it Luba, but. And then lastly, if you're watching this and you've tried to do everything I'm doing and you don't see the new button or anything else, it's because you did not go to encompass.ice.com. I should have probably started with that. If you went from desktop settings to web settings, you will not see this. You have to go to encompass.ice.com. Sorry, I didn't say that up front. All right, gang. Last questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Kevin's got, I think the format is great. Thanks as always, Larry. Kevin, you're welcome. Kelly, you're welcome. You guys have a great rest of your day. Keep the community going. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you. Bye for next time.